Hey everyone, I did not intend to make any more content about the open gaming license for D&D, at least until the new version was released officially and we could actually be certain regarding what was in it. However, I've already made some content and some very important information has become public that have changed my views I presented in that video, so I think it's imperative that I make an update video. If you are plugged into the D&D community, you already know what I'm going to be talking about here. All this stuff went public yesterday, and there's all kinds of videos out already that cover it, but there's two reasons I figure I need to make this video regardless. First, I am on record in my previous video saying that the changes they outlined in their own article, the OGLs, SRDs, and 1D&D released on December 25th, seemed relatively benign, and I stand by that. However, the leaks yesterday do not seem benign at all, and are not in line with what this article promises. And if that is the case, I think I need to make it clear how this leak has changed my views on this matter. Second, based on a key part of this leak, again if true, requires, I think, for all D&D content creators to make it clear what we think regarding what we've just heard. Now, I'm a skeptic, both by nature and philosophy, so when I hear a claim, I do not accept that claim as true without evidence. So I want to make it clear that Wizards of the Coast, at the time of me making this video, has not officially released the OGL 1.1, so everything I'm presenting here has not been 100% confirmed. But there is some circumstantial evidence that is starting to pile up. So I'm at least convinced there is a decent possibility what I'm about to share is true. Linda Codega has published an article on Gizmodo that is linked in the video description so you can read it for yourself at your leisure. Some content creators have publicly announced that they've seen the 1.1 version of the OGL and that this article is accurate. I don't know Linda, but I googled them, and Linda is an author, editor, and journalist focusing on tabletop role-playing games, science fiction and fantasy books, TV, and movies. In this article, Linda claims to have received a text file with the full OGL 1.1 document. She has not released that document in its entirety, but she does quote portions of that document in this article that fly in the face of assurances from Wizards of the Coast that the changes to the OGL would mean, and I quote, "If you're making commercial content, relatively little is going to change for most creators." If we get confirmation from Wizards of the Coast that the changes in this leak are official, then that statement is misleading. And I think misleading is actually a charitable term. Relatively little is a subjective term, so I can't outright call it lying, but in my view, there is nothing relatively little about what we're about to cover. But I first want to say why you should care about this. If you aren't a third-party content creator, then you don't use the OGL, but you probably do use their work. We're not just talking about homebrew, we're talking about published adventures, game worlds, enhancement to existing official products. If third-party creators aren't making products for use with D&D, then the health of the game suffers. The chance that you'll find that product you're looking for to enhance your own D&D experience plummets, and D&D becomes less inviting to new players as well. If you like D&D and you want to continue enjoying it in the future, the continued contribution of third-party content creators is a benefit to you and to me. And I think this leak, if it's true, puts that at risk. So the Open Gaming License is a license for content creators to make products they can sell for profit that use the SRD, or System Reference Document. The SRD includes the mechanics for D&D, as well as the basic races, classes, feats, equipment, spells, magic items, monsters, and more. The Open Gaming License allows someone making content to freely refer to anything in the SRD in their products. The existing OGL promises a perpetual license for creators to use the SRD at no cost to them. Perpetual means never ending. There are currently two versions of the OGL. There's the OGL 1.0 and the OGL 1.0A. According to Wizards of the Coast, they were going to release a third version they refer to as the OGL 1.1 early this month. So they promised 4 changes to the OGL in version 1.1. First, that you would accept the new OGL 1.1 license and inform them of what you're offering for sale. Second, that you would report revenue over $50,000 to them. Third, that you would include a creator product badge on your work. And fourth, if you earned more than $750,000 in income in a year, you would pay a royalty to them for any income over that amount. So basically, this article confirms all these changes. But we've learned more about the fourth change. It seems the royalty is based on gross profit, not net profit. This is an important distinction because it means that even if you have expenses that make your product not profitable at all, as long as your sales are over the threshold, you'll pay a royalty anyways. Second, we've learned that the royalty is 25% on sales over $750,000 unless you're using Kickstarter, in which case it's 20%. Charging royalties for gross profit instead of net profit is not what I understood reading their article, and it does make a big difference on my view of this change. They say this affects less than 20 creators worldwide, but that number seems low if we're talking about gross profit. But I don't have details on that. Here's what I know. If the royalties were net profits, I'd be okay with that. With these royalties imposed on gross profits, I consider this really damaging. Like, put people out of business damaging. As I've already stated, I want third-party creators making D&D content. This is a massive deterrent to anyone planning a major D&D compatible product that would use the OGL 1.1 to go ahead with these plans. However, the worst parts of this leak aren't about the 4 changes presented in the Wizards of the Coast article. They discuss many other changes, and some of them look terrible. They don't all look terrible, like this bit here that the company may terminate the agreement for a third-party content creator if they publish material that is, quote, blatantly racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, bigoted, or otherwise discriminatory, and that it addresses new technologies like blockchain and NFTs, being that they would have to demonstrate in litigation if necessary that the license was revoked for one of these reasons, well then that's fine by me. Here is the first part that has me really concerned. One of the biggest changes to the document is that it updates the previous available OGL 1.0 to state it is, quote, no longer an authorized license agreement. In other words, they're saying that if you want to publish D&D content, your only avenue is to use the OGL 1.1. This is alarming because the existing OGL is supposed to be perpetual. So, can they even do this legally? There's been lots of debate on this already. The Roll for Combat YouTube channel brought on who they refer to as an expert contract lawyer to answer that. I'm going to be showing some of their video, which I believe I'm presenting in context, though it's been edited for time. Nevertheless, I will be including a link to this video in the video description so you can see the whole unedited video. I should also note that the lawyer here, Alan L. Bushlow, clarifies at the beginning of the video that he's not a dedicated contract lawyer, but a general practice lawyer with some experience dealing with contracts. And of course, he gives the disclaimer that none of what he said should be taken as legal advice.
They're now saying it's null and void, it's no longer authorized, and that you have to now start using this 1.1 whether you like it or not. Right.
So the rule that says that sometimes even when an agreement is silent as to whether it can be revoked or not, it can be revoked. It usually doesn't apply in cases where there's a quid pro quo between the parties. And here it says that there's consideration. There's also a concept in the law that when you're trying to interpret an agreement, the person who drafted the agreement gets all of the presumptions made against them. So they drafted this. They didn't get any input from the gaming community when they drafted this, and yet they volunteered that there's a grant of a license and consideration. They say it right in the title. So for those commentators who have suggested that even though it's a perpetual license, it could be revoked, I'm not so sure I agree with that unless they can show that in using the license, the people that have been using the license violated some of the terms, right? So if I claim to be using the license, but I appropriate clearly proprietary material that belongs to Wizards of the Coast, like I use the D&D mark or I use the Dungeons and Dragons name, even though the license said I wouldn't do that, well, clearly they can revoke the license in that circumstance because I haven't honored my end of the agreement.
Right.
But assuming I've done everything right, it's a perpetual license. I think the better interpretation is going to be that it can't be revoked.
So what I take away from that is they can absolutely include the language in the OGL 1.1 that the previous OGL is no longer an authorized agreement, but they would have a tough time backing that up in court. However, if there's language in the OGL 1.1 that you, the content creator, by signing on to 1.1, revoke your own ability to use the original OGL, well then that's going to be legally enforceable. Based on what we're about to cover, I can't see why any content creator would sign on to this new license. Then again, according to Linda's article, they consulted attorneys for the article, and they said the new language may indicate that Wizards of the Coast is rendering any future use of the original OGL void, and by future, the date specified is January 13th, like a week from today. And if you want to make any D&D content, then the OGL 1.1 is the only way you can. So I can't really say if they can revoke the existing OGL. Maybe. So if the OGL 1.1 is the only way forward for content creators, and those 4 changes were the changes in the document, I wouldn't be happy about the royalties on gross sales, but I think it wouldn't necessarily be catastrophic. But it's not just those 4 changes, it appears. According to the article, and I'll just read this verbatim, there is no mention of perpetual worldwide rights given to creators, which was present in Section 4 of the original OGL. And one of the caveats is that the company can modify or terminate this agreement for any reason whatsoever, provided we give 30 days notice. This is catastrophic. So, first off, they can just get rid of this OGL at any time. Though I suppose then that would mean they don't have a leg to stand on, saying the original OGL is no longer authorized because this agreement we terminated says so. But just imagine this for a moment. So let's say you want to plan a big project. You're going to need designers, editors, printers, artists, and more, and you will need to pay these people for their work. Then you start work, make these payments, only to find out that Wizards of the Coast has posted their 30 days notice that the agreement is being terminated. Your project could be months away from release. This is your financial ruin. Content creators are not going to sign on to an agreement that can be terminated at any time for any reason. They had this kind of wording in the GSL for 4th edition, and third-party content creators avoided 4th edition like the plague for that very reason. You're literally telling content creators that they are free to make product for your game if they sign on, but also that you can take it away with 30 days notice even if they did nothing wrong. This wording just can't be in there. I'm not saying it's not in there. I'm saying if it is, it absolutely needs to be removed or revised. That's not the only very surprising part of this leak, though. It says that Wizards of the Coast gets the right to use any content that licensees create, whether commercial or non-commercial. Sorry, what? That you only had to register your product at all if it was commercial. But this document says that any content created under the updated OGL, regardless of whether or not it's owned by the creator, Wizards will have non-exclusive, perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, sub-licensable, royalty-free license to use that content for any purpose. Now, I am not a lawyer, but this doesn't sound legal, and I hope it isn't. Nevertheless, this indicates that they are not looking for a fair agreement with their content creators. Their license to you is revocable, includes royalties, but then they get your product by a license that is irrevocable and royalty-free. Not just your products, even your share-alike creations. So this is unacceptable. This threatens the health of D&D in the future, and as I said, I needed to make this video for 2 reasons. First, to make it clear that these new insights into what the OGL 1.1 includes are not okay with me. Based on my reading of the Wizards of the Coast article on what the OGL 1.1 would include, I was okay with that. This, I'm not okay with. Sure, the doom and gloom predictions that there would be no gaming license for D&D still appear to be incorrect. Now, I said in my original video on the OGL that I thought that this idea that Wizards of the Coast is going to get you to sign an NDA only to tell you there would be no gaming license for D&D and you wouldn't be able to make content for it anymore, haha, and if you say anything about it, we're going to sue you and you're going to lose everything. That seemed like fear-mongering to me because, in my opinion, that is a ludicrous scenario, and I still think it's a ludicrous scenario. However, what we see now isn't a ludicrous scenario, but it's still really bad. Instead, it at least seems, based on this leak, that the content creators were presented with this 1.1 document, told that they would need to sign on to it if they wanted to continue creating, but this document presents terms that are going to be unacceptable to most third-party content creators. And I think most third-party content creators are going to stop making D&D related product if this leak turns out to be correct. But the second reason I needed to make this video is Linda's article concludes with this paragraph. Wizards of the Coast is clearly expecting these OGL changes to be met with some resistance. The document does note that if the company oversteps, they are aware that they, quote, will receive community pushback and bad PR, and we're more than open to being convinced that we made a wrong decision. So if that is the case, Wizards, if this article is accurate, you've made the wrong decision. This OGL 1.1 is unacceptable, and you need to change it for the very health of your own product. It is in your best interest, as well as ours, for you to reconsider. So that's it. I'm going to rush this video out.